Fireside Tales for Wolfgang, Episode 51. Greetings and salutations. I'm Hunter Ackerman, here to read some classic literature for you. So, this evening's story, Jack London. I love Jack London. Love Jack London. Love the way he writes animal characters in particular. Tonight's story largely follows human protagonists. There are a couple of dogs in it, but they are definitely not anything like main or named characters. Oh, hello, Charity. Glad to see you immediately back. So I thought I'd start this evening by reading a little bio of Mr. London. So let's see. Jack London was born in 1876. He died in 1916, rather young. At the height of his popularity in 1913, Jack London was said to be the highest paid, best known, and most popular writer in the world. But the road to success was not an easy one. He was a son of an itinerant Irish astrologer. He was brought up in poverty and worked at various odd jobs to help his family. He even spent a period of time working on a boat, and in a time as is just listed by the encyclopedia entry as an oyster pirate. Oyster pilot, that would be interesting. An oyster pirate. So I'm assuming he was like raiding people's oyster beds and like private property on the ocean floor. That's what I gather from that. In 1897, Jack London joined the Klondike Gold Rush and later sold the account of his adventures in Alaska and Canada to the Atlantic Monthly as, this is the title, An Odyssey of the North. Although he never found his gold, his experiences in the extreme environment of this cold part of the world gave him ideas for the stories he would write when he decided to return to San Francisco, where in 1900 he published a collection of his short stories in The Son of the Wolf. It's another title. Just wow, what a title. London belonged to the naturalism and realism movement. And accordingly, a story's actions and events are caused mainly by humans' internal biological needs, or by the external forces of nature and the environment. So his stories are so vivid that the reader or listener can have such a strong vicarious experience as to be right there with the character. That's what makes him a damn good writer. His most famous novel, published in 1903, was The Call of the Wild, which deals with civilized man getting back in touch with his deep animal instincts. Of course, Call of the Wild was about a canine, had a canine protagonist. Let's see, Call of the Wild was Buck, as I recall. The was he half wolf? He was a huge mongrel of a just mean-ass fighting dog. Other notable works by Jack London, with The Sea Wolf in 1904, John Barleycorn in 1913, which was an autobiographical about his experiences with alcoholism. London has been described as one of the greatest revolutionary figures of American history and wrote more than 50 books. He had readers from all over the world, and his stories and books were translated into many different languages. Despite his success, alcohol and 2 broken marriages added to his unhappiness. So, by the age of only 40, in 1916, he died of a drug overdose, which is believed to have been deliberate. So, happy ending. There's a character in tonight's short called Louis Savoy. And I bet Mom could tell me this off the top of her head. Wasn't Louis Savoy the name of the main character? There was another Jack London story I'm forgetting the title of, about a sled dog race, and they're racing for the love of a local native woman. And wasn't Louis Savoy like the protagonist in that? I think that was the case. Fireside Tailes for Wolfgang. Originally broadcast on GWC Productions YouTube channel, Caps Media Television Channel 6 in Ventura on KPPQ LP Ventura at 104.1 FM and on the KPPQ Podcast Network. Episodes can also be viewed on Pasadena Media, either on Spectrum Charter Channel 32 or on AT&T Uverse Channel 99. Let us begin this story. This story is called Grit of Women by Jack London. A wolfish head, wistful-eyed and frost-rimmed, thrust aside the tent flaps. "Hey, Chuck! Swash, Chuck! You limb of Satan!" chorused the protesting inmates. Bettles rapped the dog sharply with a tin plate, and it withdrew hastily. Louis Savoy refastened the straps, kicked a frying pan over against the bottom, and warmed his hands. It was very cold without. 48 hours gone. The spirit thermometer had bust at 68 below, and since that time, it had grown steadily and bitterly colder. There was no telling when the snap would end, and it is poor policy, unless the gods will it, to venture far from a stove at such times, or to increase the quantity of cold atmosphere one must breathe. Men sometimes do it, and sometimes they chill their lungs. This leads up to a dry, hacking cough, noticeably irritable when bacon is being fried. After that, somewhere along in the heat, somewhere along in the spring or the summer, a hole is burned in the frozen muck. Into this, a man's carcass is dumped, covered over with moss, and left with the assurance that it'll rise on the crack of doom, wholly and frigidly intact. For those of little faith, skeptical of material integration on that fateful day, no fitter country than the Klondike can be recommended to die in. But it's not to be inferred from this that it's a fit country for living purposes either. It was very cold without, but it was not over warm within. The only article which might be designated furniture was the stove, and for this, the men were frank in displaying their preference. Upon half of the floor, pine boughs had been cast. Above this were spread the sleeping furs. Beneath lay the winter's snowfall. The remainder of the floor was moccasin-packed snow, littered with pots and pans and the general impedimenta of an Arctic camp. The stove was red and roaring hot, but only a bare 3 feet away lay a block of ice as sharp-edged and dry as when first quarried from the creek bottom. The pressure of the outside cold forced the inner heat upward. Just above the stove, where the pipe penetrated the roof, was a tiny circle of dry canvas. Next, with the pipe always the center, a circle of steaming canvas. Next, a damp and moisture-exuding ring. And finally, the rest of the tent, sidewalls and top coated with a half-inch of dry, white, crystal-encrusted frost. A young fella lying asleep in the furs, bearded and wan and weary, raised a moan of pain, and without waking, he increased the pitch and intensity of his anguish. His body half lifted from the blankets and quivered and shrank spasmodically as though drawn away from a bed of nettles. "Roll him over," ordered Bettles. "He's cramping." Then and there, with pitiless goodwill, he was pitched upon and rolled and thumped and pounded by half a dozen willing comrades. "Ah, damn the trail," he muttered softly as he threw off the robes and set up. "I've run across country, played quarter 3 seasons hand running and hardened myself in all manner of good ways. Then a pilgrimage to this God-forsaken land and find myself an effeminate Athenian without the simplest rudiments of manhood." He hunched up to the fire and rolled a cigarette. "Oh, I'm not whining, mind you. I could take my medicine all right, but I'm just decently ashamed of myself, that's all. Here I am, on top of a dirty 30 miles, as stiff and sore as a child after a 5-mile walk on a country turnpike. God, makes me sick. Got a match?" "Don't get the tantrums, youngster." Battles passed over the required fire stick and waxed patriarchal. "You see, son, you gotta allow for some breaking in, suffering type cracky. Don't I recollect the first time I hit the trail? Stiff. I seen the time it'd take me 10 minutes to get my mouth from the water hole and come to my feet, every joint cracking and kicking fit to kill. Cramp? In such knots, it'd take the camp a half a day to untangle me. You're all right for a cub, and you got the true spirit. Come this day a year from now, and you'll walk all us old bucks into the ground anytime. And best in your favor, you ain't got that streak of fat in your makeup which has sent many a husky man to the bosom of Abraham before his right and proper time." "Streak of fat?" "Yep. Comes along, bulk. Tain't the big men as is the best when it comes to the trail." "Never heard of it." "Never heard of it? Well, it's a dead straight open and shut fact, and ain't no getting round. Bulk's all well enough for a mighty big effort, but without staying power, that ain't worth a continental whoop, and staying power ain't bulk, ain't running mates. Takes a small, wiry fellas when it comes to getting right down and hanging on like a lean-jowled dog to a bone. Why, hell's fire, big men. They just ain't in it." "Right, by God," broke in Louis Savoy. "That is no what you call joshing. I know one man so very big is like the buffalo with him on the Sulphur Creek Stampede. Go one small man's Lon McFain. You know that Lon McFain, that little Irisher with the red hair and the grin, yeah? And they walk and walk and walk all the day long and all the night long. And the big man, him become very tired and lay down mooch in the snow. And little man, kick big man. Little man kick big man and him cry like, what you call me the kid? And the little man's kick and he kick and by me by long time, long way, kick big man's into my cabin. 3 days for him crawl out of my blankets. Never I see big squaw like him. No, never. Him have what you call the streak of fat, you bet. But there was Axel Gunderson. Prince spoke up. The great Scandinavian, with the tragic events which shadowed his passing, had made a deep mark on the mining engineer. He lies up there somewhere. He swept his hand in the vague direction of the mysterious east. I'll tell you what, biggest man that ever turned his heels to saltwater or run a moose down with a sheer grit, supplemented Beatles. But he's the prove the rule exception. Look at his woman, Unga. Tip the scales on 110, clean meat and nary an ounce to spare. She'd bank grit against his for all there was in him, and see him and go him better if it was possible. Nothing over the earth, or in it, or under it, she wouldn't have done.
But she loved him,
objected the engineer. Tain't that. No, something else. Look, you brothers, broke in Sitka Charlie from his seat on the grub box. You have spoken the streak of fat that runs in big men's muscles, of the grit of women and the love, and ye have spoken fair. But I have in mind things which happened when the land was young and the fires of men as far apart as the stars. It was then I had concern with a big man and a streak of fat, and a woman. And the woman was small, but her heart was greater than the beef heart of the man. And she had that grit. And we traveled a weary trail, even to the salt water. And the cold was bitter, the snow deep, the hunger great. And the woman's love was a mighty love. No more can man say than this. He paused, and with the hatchet, broke pieces of ice from the large chunk beside him. These he threw into the gold pan on the stove where the drinking water thawed. The men drew up closer. He of the cramps sought greater comfort, but vainly for his stiffened body. Brothers, my blood is red with the sea wash, but my heart is white. To the faults of my fathers I owe the one, to the virtues of my friends the other. A great truth came to me when I was yet a boy. I learned that to your kind and you was given the earth, that the sea wash could not withstand you, and like the caribou and the bear, must perish in the cold. So I came into the warm and sat among you by your fires, and behold, I became one of you. I've seen much in my time. I've known strange things and bucked on big trails with men of many breeds. And because of these things I measured deeds after your manner, and judge men and think thoughts. Wherefore, when I speak harshly of one of your own kind, I know you will not take it amiss. And when I speak high of one of my father's people, you will not take it upon you to say, Sitka Charlie is a sea-wash, and there's a crooked light in his eyes, and small honor to his tongue. Is that not so? Deep down in throat, the circle vouchsafed its assent. The woman was Pasuk. I got her in fair trade from her people who were of the coast, and whose Chilkat totem stood at the head of a salt arm of the sea. My heart did not go out to the woman, nor did I take stock of her looks, for she scarce took her eyes from the ground, and she was timid and afraid, as girls will be when cast into a stranger's arms who they have never seen before. As I say, there was no place in my heart for her to creep, for I had a great journey in mind, and stood in need of one to feed my dogs and to lift a paddle with me through the long river days. One blanket would cover the twain, so I chose Pasuk. Have I not said I was a servant to the government? If not, it is well that you know. So, I was taken on a warship, sleds and dogs and evaporated foods, and with me came Pasuk. And we went north to the winter ice rim of Bering Sea, where we were landed, myself and Pasuk, and the dogs. I was also given moneys of the government, for I was at service, and the charts of lands which the eyes of man had never dwelt upon, and messages. These messages were sealed and protected shrewdly from the weather, and I was to deliver them to the whale ships of the Arctic, icebound by the great Mackenzie. Never was there so great a river, forgetting only our own Yukon, the mother of all rivers. All of which is neither here nor there, for my story deals not with the whale ships, nor with the berg-bound winter I spent by the Mackenzie. Afterward, in the spring, when the days lengthened, and there was a crust to the snow, we came south, Pasuk and I, to the country of the Yukon. A weary journey, but the sun pointed out the way of our feet. It was a naked land then, as I have said, and we worked up the current with pole and paddle till we came to 40 Mile. Good it was to see white faces once again, so we put into the bank, and that winter was a hard winter. The darkness and the cold drew down upon us, and with them the famine. To each man, the agent of the company gave 40 pounds of flour and 20 of bacon. There were no beans, and the dogs howled always, and there were flat bellies and deep-lined faces, and strong men became weak, and weak men died. There was also much scurvy. Then came we together in the store one night, and the empty shelves made us feel our own emptiness the more. We talked low by the light of the fire, for the candles had been set aside for those who might yet gasp in the spring. Discussion was held, and it was said that a man must go forth to the salt water and to tell the world our misery. At this, all eyes turned to me, for it was understood that I was a great traveler. "It is 700 miles," said I, to Haynes Mission by the Sea, and every inch of it snowshoe work. "Give me the pick of your dogs and the best of your grub, and I will go. And with me shall go Pasuk." To this they were agreed, but there arose one, Long Jeff, a Yankee man, big-boned, big-muscled. Also his talk was big. He, too, was a mighty traveler. He said, born to the snowshoe and bred upon buffalo milk. He would go with me in case I fell by the trail, that he may carry the word on to the mission. I was young and knew not Yankee men. How was I know that big talk betokened the streak of fat, or that Yankee men who did great things kept their teeth together? So we took the pick of the dogs and the best of the grub, and struck the trail, we three, Pasuk, Long Jeff, and I. Well, you all have broken virgin snow, labored at the gee-pole, and are not unused to the packed river jams, so I'll talk little of the toil, save on some days we made 10 miles, and on others 30, but more often it was 10. And the best of the grub was not good, while we went on stint from the start. Likewise, the pick of the dogs was poor, and we were hard put to keep them on our legs. At the White River, our 3 sleds became 2 sleds, and we had only come 200 miles. But we lost nothing. The dogs that left the traces went into the bellies of those that remained. Not a greeting, not a curl of smoke, till we made Pelly. Here I had counted on grub, and here I had counted on leaving Long Jeff, who was whining and trail sore. But The factor's lungs were wheezing, his eyes bright, his cachet nigh empty, and he showed us the empty cachet of the missionary. Also, his grave with the rocks piled high to keep off the dogs. There was a bunch of Indians there, but babes and old men there were none, and it was clear that few would see the spring. So, we pulled on, light-stomached and heavy-hearted, with 1,000 miles of snow and silence between us and Haynes' mission by the sea. The darkness was at its worst, and at midday the sun could not clear the skyline to the south. But the ice jams were smaller, the going better. So I pushed the dogs hard and traveled late and early. As I said, at 40 Mile, every inch of it was snowshoe work, and the shoes made great sores on our feet, which cracked and scabbed, but would not heal. And every day these sores grew more grievous, till in the morning, when we girded on the shoes, Long Jeff cried like a small child. I put him at the fore of the light sled to break trail, but he slipped off the shoes for comfort. Because of this, the trail was not packed. His moccasins made great holes, and into these holes the dogs wallowed. The bones of the dogs were ready to break through their hides, and this was not good for them. So I spoke hard words to the man, and he promised, and broke his word. Then I beat him with the dog whip, and after that the dogs wallowed no more. He was a child, what of the pain and the streak of fat. But Pasuk, while the man lay by the fire and wept, she cooked, and in the morning helped lash the sleds, and in the evening to unlash them, and she saved the dogs. Ever was she to the fore, lifting the webbed shoes and making the way easy. Pasuk, how shall I say? I took it for granted that she should do these things and thought no more about it. For my mind was busy with other matters, and besides, I was young in years and knew little of women. It was only on looking back that I came to understand. And the man became worthless. The dogs had little strength in them, but he stole rides on the sled when he lagged behind. Pasuk said she would take one sled, so the man had nothing to do. In the morning, I gave him his fair share of grub and started him on the trail alone. Then the woman and I broke camp, packed the sleds, harnessed the dogs. By midday, when the sun mocked us, we would overtake the man with the tears frozen on his cheeks and pass him. In the night, we made camp, set aside his fair share of grub, and spread his furs. Also, we made a big fire that he might see, and hours afterward he would come limping in and eat his grub with moans and groans and sleep. He was not sick, this man. He was only trail sore and tired, weak with hunger. But Pasuk and I were trail sore and tired and weak with hunger, and we did all the work he did none. But he had the streak of fat, of which our brother Bettles has spoken. Further, we gave the man always his fair share of grub. Then, one day, we met two ghosts journeying through the silence. They were a man and a boy, and they were white. The ice had opened on Lake Labarge, and through it had gone their main outfit. One blanket each carried about his shoulders. At night, they built a fire and crouched over it till morning. They had a little flour. This they stirred in warm water and drank. The man showed me 8 cups of flour, all they had. And Pelly, stricken with famine, was still 200 miles away. They said also that there was an Indian behind, that they had bivouacked fair, but that he could not keep up. I did not believe they had bivouacked fair, else the Indian would have kept up, but I could give them no grub. They strove to steal a dog, the fattest, which was very thin, but I shoved my pistol in their faces and told them, "Begone!" And they went away like drunken men through the silence toward Pelly. I had 3 dogs now and 1 sled, and the dogs were only bones and hair. When there is little wood, the fire burns low and the cabin grows cold. So with us. With little grub, the frost bites sharp, and our faces were black and frozen till our own mothers would not have known us, and our feet were very sore. In the morning when I hit the trail, I sweated to keep down the cry when the pain of the snowshoes smote me. Pasuk. Pasuk never opened her lips, but stepped to the fore to break the way. The man howled. The 30-mile river was swift, and the current ate away the ice from beneath, and there were many air holes and cracks and much open water. One day we came upon the man resting, for he had gone ahead, as was his wont in the morning. But between us was open water. This he had passed around by taking to the rim ice where it was too narrow for a sled. So we found an ice bridge. Pasuk weighed little and went first, with a long pole crosswise in her hands and the chance she broke through. But she was light, and her shoes were large, and she passed over. Then she called the dogs. But they had neither poles nor shoes, and they broke through and were swept under by the water. I held tight to the sled from behind till the traces broke, and the dogs went on down under the ice. There was little meat to them, but I had counted on them for a week's grub, and they were gone. The next morning I divided all the grub, which was little, into 3 portions, and I told Long Jeff that he could keep up with us or not as he saw fit, for we were going to travel light and fast. But he raised his voice and cried over his sword feat and his troubles, and said harsh things about comradeship. Pasuk's feet were sore, and my feet were sorer, aye, sorer than his, for we had walked with the dogs. Also, we looked to see. Long Jeff swore he would die before he hit the trail again, so Pasuk took a fur robe, and I a cooking pot and an axe, and we made ready to go. But she looked on the man's portion and said, "It is wrong to waste good food on a baby. He is better dead." I shook my head and said, "No, that a comrade once was a comrade always." Then she spoke of the men of 40 Mile, that they were many men and good, and that they looked to me for grub in the spring. But when I still said no, she snatched the pistol from my belt quick, and as our brother Bettles has spoken, Long Jeff went to the bosom of Abraham before his time. I chided Pasuk for this, but she showed no sorrow, nor was she sorrowful, and in my heart I knew she was right. Sitka Charlie paused here and threw pieces of ice into the gold pan on the stove. The men were silent, their backs chilled to the sobbing cries of the dogs as they gave tongue to their misery in the outer cold. But Sitka Charlie went on with his narrative. Day by day we passed in the snow the sleeping places of the 2 ghosts, Pasuk and I. and we knew we would be glad, for such ere we made salt water. Then we came to the Indian, like another ghost, with his face set toward Pelly. They had not bivouacked up fair, the man and the boy, he said, and he had no flour for 3 days. Each night he boiled pieces of his moccasins in a cup and ate them. He did not have much moccasin left, and he was a coast Indian and told us these things through Pasuk, who spoke in his tongue. He was a stranger in the Yukon, and he knew not the way, but his face was set to Pelly. How far was it? 2 sleeps? 10? 100 sleeps? He did not know, but he was going to Pelly. It was too far to turn back. He could only keep on. He did not ask for grub, for he could see we too were hard put. Pasuk looked at the man and at me, as though she were of 2 minds, like a mother partridge whose young are in trouble. So I turned to her and said, "This man has been dealt unfair. Shall I give him of our grub a portion?" I saw her eyes light as with quick pleasure, but she looked long at the man and at me, and her mouth drew close and hard, and she said, "No. The salt water is afar off, and death lies in wait. Better it is that he take this stranger man, and let my man Charlie pass." So the man went away in the silence toward Pelly. That night she wept. Never had I seen her weep before, nor was it the smoke of the fire, for the wood was dry wood. So I marveled at her sorrow and thought her woman's heart had grown soft in the darkness of the trail and the pain. Life is a strange thing. Much have I thought on it and pondered long, yet daily the strangeness of it grows not less but more. Why this longing for life? It is a game which no man wins. To live is to toil hard and to suffer sore till old age creeps heavily upon us, and we throw down our hands on the cold ashes of dead fires. It is hard to live. In pain, the babe sucks his first breath. In pain, the old man gasps his last. And all his days are full of trouble and sorrow, yet he goes down to the open arms of death, stumbling, falling, with head turned backwards, fighting to the last. And death is kind. There's only life and the things of life that hurt. Yet we love life, and we hate death. It is very strange. It is very strange. We spoke little, Pasuk and I, in the days which came. In the night we lay in the snow like dead people, and in the morning we went on our way, walking like dead people. And all things were dead. There were no ptarmigan, no squirrels, no snowshoe rabbits, nothing. The river made no sound beneath its white robes. The sap was frozen in the forest, and it became cold as now. And in the night the stars drew near and large, and leapt and danced. And in the day the sun-dogs mocked us, till we saw many suns, and all the air flashed and sparkled, and the snow was diamond dust. And there was no heat, no sound, only the bitter cold and the silence. As I say, we walked like dead people, as in a dream, and we kept no count of time. Only our faces were set to salt water, our souls strained for salt water, and our feet carried us towards salt water. We camped by the Takina and knew it not. Our eyes looked upon the white horse, but we saw it not. Our feet trod the portage of the Karen, but they felt it not. we felt nothing. And we fell often, by the way, but we fell always with our faces set towards salt water. Our last grub went, and we had shared fare, Pasuk and I, but she fell more often, and at Caribou Crossing, her strength left her, and in the morning we lay beneath the one robe and did not take the trail. It was in my mind to stay there and meet death hand in hand with Pasuk, for I had grown old and had I had learned the love of a woman. Also, it was 80 miles to Haynes' mission, and the great Chilkoot, far above the timberline, reared his storm-swept head between, but Pasuk spoke to me, low, with my ear against her lips, that I might hear. And now, because she does not fear my anger, she spoke her heart, and told me of her love, and of many things which I did not understand. And she said, "You are my man, Charlie, and I have been a good woman to you. And in all the days I have made your fire and cooked your food and fed your dogs and lifted paddle or broken trail, I have not complained. Nor did I say that there was more warmth in the lodge of my father, or that there was more grub on the Chilkat. When you have spoken, I have listened. When you have ordered, I have obeyed. Is it not so, Charlie?" And I said, "Aye, it is so." And she said, "When you first came to the Chilkat, you did not look upon me, but bought me as a man buys a dog and took me away. My heart was hard against you and filled with bitterness and fear. But that was long ago, for you were kind to me, Charlie, as a good man is kind to his dog. Your heart was cold, and there was no room for me. You dealt with me fair, and your ways were just. And I was with you when you did bold deeds and led great ventures, and I measured you against the men of other breeds, and I saw you stood among them full of honor, and your word was wise, your tongue true. And I grew proud of you, till it came that you filled all my heart, and all my thought was of you. You were as the midsummer sun, when its golden trail runs in a circle and never leaves the sky. And whatever way I cast my eyes, I beheld the sun. But your heart was ever cold, Charlie, and there was no room." And I said, "It is so. It was cold, and there was no room. But that is past. Now my heart is like the snowfall in the spring when the sun has come back. There is a great thaw, and a bending, a sound of running waters, and a budding and sprouting of green things, and there's drumming of partridges and the songs of robins and great music, for the winter is broken, Pasuk, and I have learned the love of a woman." She smiled and moved for me to draw her closer, and she said, "I am glad." After that, she lay quiet for a long time, breathing softly, her head upon my breast. Then she whispered, "The trail ends here, and I'm tired. But first I would speak of other things. In the long ago, when I was a girl on the Chilkat, I played alone among the skin bales of my father's lodge, for the men were away on the hunt, and the women and boys were dragging in the meat. It was in the spring, and I was alone. A great brown bear, just awake from his winter's sleep, hungry, his fur hanging to the bones in flaps of leanness, shoved his head within the lodge and said, 'Woof!' My brother came running back with the first sled of meat, and he fought the bear with burning sticks from the fire. and the dogs in their harnesses with the sleds behind them fell upon the bear. There was a great battle and much noise. They rolled in the fire. The skin bales were scattered, the lodge overthrown, but in the end, the bear lay dead, but with the fingers of my brother in his mouth, and the marks of his claws upon my brother's face. Did you mark the Indian by the Pelly Trail? His mitten, which had no thumb, his hand, which he warmed by our fire. He was my brother. And I said he should have no food. And he went away in the silence without food. This, my brothers, was the love of Pasuk, who died in the snow by the Caribou Crossing. It was a mighty love, for she denied her brother for the man who led her away on weary trails to a bitter end. And further, such was this woman's love, she denied herself. Ere her eyes closed for the last time, she took my hand and slipped it under her squirrel skin parka to her waist. I felt there a well-filled food pouch and learned the secret of her lost strength. Day by day, we had shared fare to the last least bit, and day by day, but half her share had she eaten. The other half had gone into the well-filled pouch. And she said, "This is the end of the trail for Pasuk. But your trail, Charlie, leads on and on, over the Great Chilkoot, down to Haynes Mission and the sea. And it leads on and on by the light of many suns, over unknown lands and strange waters, and it is full of years and honors and great glories. It leads you to the lodges of many women and good women. But it will never lead you to a greater love than the love of Pasuk." And I knew the woman spoke true. But a madness came upon me, and I threw the well-filled pouch from me and swore that my trail had reached an end till her tired eyes grew soft with tears. And she said, "Among men has Sitka Charlie walked in honor, and ever has his word been true. Does he forget that honor now and talk vain words by the Caribou Crossing? Does he remember no more the men of 40 Mile who gave him of their food, the best of the dogs of their pick? Ever has Pasuk been proud of her man. Let himself lift himself up, gird on his snowshoes and be gone, that she may still keep her pride, alone in the snow." And when she grew cold in my arms, I arose and sought out the well-filled pouch and girt on my snowshoes and staggered along the trail, for there was a weakness in my knees and my head was dizzy, and in my ears there was a roaring and a flashing of fire upon my eyes. The forgotten trails of boyhood came back to me. I sat by the full pots of the potlatch feast and raised my voice in song and danced to the chanting of the men and maidens and the booming of the walrus drums. And Pasuk held my hand and walked by my side. When I laid down to sleep, she waked me. When I stumbled and fell, she raised me. When I wandered in the deep snow, she led me back to the trail. And in this way, like a man bereft of reason, who sees strange visions and whose thoughts are light with wine. I came to Haines' mission by the sea. Sitka Charlie threw back the tent flaps. It was midday. To the south, just clearing the bleak Henderson Divide, poised the cold disked sun. On either hand, the sundogs blazed. The air was a gossamer of glittering frost. In the foreground, beside the trail, a wolf dog, bristling with frost, thrust a long snout heavenward and mourned. Wow. So that was one of many happy stories from Jack London. I don't even know what to say or how to reflect on something like that. Damn, Jack. That was good writing. I've never read that story before I was prepping for this evening's show. So I'm just extremely grateful to Jack London for that particular tale. And now for Ask Hunter Anything, where I answer questions submitted by you, the viewers. Please know that these episodes are live streamed on the Hunter's Acoustic Cabin YouTube channel every Monday evening at 9 o'clock California time, before they're made into this broadcast version. So you may hear reference to those who chat with me during my answers. And hey, if you have a question that you would like answered on Fireside Tailes for Wolfgang, email me using the email address AskHunterAnything@gmail.com. It's just a life's hobby, passion, ambition, whatever you want to call it, of mine. I'm just a really big fan of really good questions. Spent my entire life cultivating the best questions that I could possibly find. And I'd like to hear what questions that you have that you would put into that category. A very quick update on news from the James Webb Space Telescope. The sun shield was deployed and was being tensioned when I last saw the update. So, thank you, Charity. I thought I'd just elucidate slightly on why the sun shield is so important to this thing. It's been pointed out several times, once on this show when I first started talking about the James Webb, that it is primarily geared to see in infrared. So that is to say, it makes visual representations out of heat. The thing is so sensitive that if it were the distance of, say, the surface of the Earth to the moon, it would be able to see a bumblebee on the surface of the moon. So this is to say that it's really, really heat sensitive, right? I mean, this is just its scientific value is its being able to see heat with such extraordinary sensitivity. And so the reason that the sun shield is so extraordinarily important to this thing is if you and I were in a room, say sitting 3 feet from each other, and I was talking exactly like this, you would have no problem hearing me under any normal room conditions. If, by contrast, we were 3 feet from each other, but at a really, really loud rock concert, and I was only speaking this loud, you wouldn't be able to hear me very well. Just too much noise in the room, right? So what's going on with this thing, with the James Webb, and the reason that it needs a sun shield is the heat from the sun is analogous to room noise or the concert noise, if you want to follow the metaphor that I just described. So we need for it to be as shielded from heat as we can possibly make it happen, so that this thing can only see the heat that we want it to see. And for this reason, it's going to be able to see galaxies that have had light traveling towards us for about 13.5 billion years. That's billion with a B. We were kind of talking about this last week, I believe, maybe it was 2 weeks ago, when people refer to this thing as being able to see into the past. That's exactly what they are referring to. So imagine that the universe, all of the cosmos, all of existence only has been around for about 13.8 billion years. So a galaxy that's about 13.5 billion years old is a galaxy that formed at the dawn of time. And the James Webb is going to be able to take in heat from those primordial galaxies formed at the dawn of time. So we're going to get a really good snapshot as to what some of the earliest galaxies formed in the universe looked like when they first formed. This thing is also going to be able to do a form of spectroscopy. So one of the things that we've been able to do for decades now is, you know how the light of a prism divides, say, white light into a whole rainbow, all right? We have scientific equipment. Again, we've been doing this for decades. This is not new news. We have equipment that can take the light from, let's say, a particular element, burning hydrogen, for example, and not spread it into a whole rainbow like a prism does for white light, but hydrogen will give off a particular signature of lines. Helium will do the same thing, but will give a different signature of different lines. Oxygen, nitrogen, carbon, etc. Literally all of the elements have their own spectrometer signatures. And so one of the ways that the James Webb Telescope is going to be extremely valuable is that we are going to be able to point it at exoplanets, or at potential, like where we think that there is an exoplanet going around a star, see the light that is coming from its parent star through that exoplanet, and then be able to dissect what elements that we see that are in the atmosphere of that exoplanet.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of
Fireside Tales for Wolfgang. You can view more of my work at Hunter's Acoustic Cabin. Directed by Hunter Ackerman. Produced by GWC Productions. In memory of Wolfgang Beastly. Originally broadcast on GWC Productions' YouTube channel, Caps Media Television Channel 6 in Ventura on KPPQ LP Ventura at 104.1 FM, and on the KPPQ Podcast Network. Episodes can also be viewed on Pasadena Media, either on Spectrum Charter Channel 32 or on AT&T UVerse Channel 99.